It's been a while since we've done a Dynasty Superflex rookie mock draft with landing spots. Our friends over at the NFL Stock Exchange, Trevor and Connor Rogers, did a 3-round NFL mock draft post-combine. So we, as always, are going to react to it. We're going to do a 2-round Dynasty Superflex mock draft based on the landing spots, based on the draft capital that Trevor and Connor outlined. You're not going to want to miss it. Let's get into it. All right, so we are now into the mock draft. It's a Dynasty Superflex rookie mock. Like I said, if you skip the intro, we are doing this based on the draft capital and landing spot of our friends over at the NFL Stock Exchange. 6 point per passing touchdown, half tight end premium. We're going to do a 2-rounder. There's going to be players left over. Not a whole lot of running backs in this one. Just FYI, if you guys are like, where are all the running backs? We're only drafting players that Connor and Trevor actually put in their 3-round mock draft. So there was only one running back selected. But obviously, even if we had 4th or 5th round draft capital for some of these guys, there'd probably be more that end up getting mixed in. Danny, you want to start it off with the first overall pick? I'll let you kick things off.
Yeah, first overall pick. Again, this is a 12-man Superflex rookie mock, 6-point passing touchdowns. If this is a 10-man, if this is a 4-point passing touchdown, maybe you have some argument of a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., but my 101 and my 101 throughout the cycle, he goes 101 in the draft. Caleb Williams of the USC Trojans. I mean, this guy's a natural playmaker. Lance at the first overall pick, pairs with DJ Moore in this instance. I just think at this point, with Caleb Williams, the prospect profile that he represents, he can instantly be a top 10 to 12 quarterback in the NFL going into next year, with the upside of potentially being a top 5 guy overall. I mean, you're talking about a CJ Stroud level ascension that I can see coming from Caleb Williams if this year materializes the way I think for Chicago, because they are not your typical first overall picking team. I really do think they could be a sneaky NFC threat even as soon as next year, having the first overall pick, adding a player at 9th overall, and like you'll see in the 2nd and 3rd round, what they were able to add in the draft.
Yeah, I believe they spent the 2nd pick on defense, so they didn't actually go with a wide receiver there at the end of the top 10. But yeah, you can book it in. 101, Caleb Williams goes to the Chicago Bears, if you want to put that one in, and then we'll get on to the 102 here. Yep. I'm going to roll here at 102. Obviously, this is going to be a debate for Washington Commanders front office people. It's going to be a debate for New England Patriots and such. We do have a little bit of a wonky situation here where Jayden Daniels goes number 2 to the Commanders. We have Maye going number 3 to the Giants. So the Patriots trade down a couple spots and they end up getting a top wide receiver and, pocket a bunch of picks. I think it was like a future first and like a 2nd rounder or whatever. And the Giants come up and get their future quarterback. I'm going to end up going with the chalky number 1 player in the draft guy with Marvin Harrison Jr. going number 2 overall, or number 4 overall in the actual draft, number 2 overall here. To the Arizona Cardinals. It's a fit we've talked about already. You get a solid franchise quarterback to throw him to with Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison, the best wide receiver prospect I've personally ever scouted. So like the fit of Marvin there, I think he would be my 102 if he goes to the Chargers or Cardinals pretty much no matter what, unless like, the Vikings or somebody or the Falcons got really aggressive for Maye. I think that Marvin's probably my unshakable 102, but of course we're going to evaluate that post-draft. In this scenario, he definitely would stay my 102. So what direction are you looking to go here with the 1-3?
Yeah, and at the 1-3 here, I understand people may be worried about the landing spot here. Oh, New York Giants. We don't necessarily know what that's going to look like, but Maye, talent-wise, is my 103. Goes at the 103 spot in the NFL draft. New York Giants end up trading up in this instance with the New England Patriots, and I mean, I just trust the player at this point. I trust Brian Daboll. I trust Maye, the talent that he represents. I trust that they will be able to build a solid weapon score for him. And I mean, I'm just trusting my board here. Troy Franklin added in the 2nd round here at the 39th overall pick. You have, Jalen Hyde entering his 2nd year. You have Darren Waller potentially coming back from injury this upcoming year. I think it's more than enough for a nesting spot for the talent level that I think Maye represents. Like I said with Caleb Williams, I think he's got the natural ability to be regarded as a top 5 dynasty quarterback. Maye graded closer to Caleb Williams than Jayden Daniels graded to Maye in my grading cycle. So it's really a no-brainer for me. I just think the talent of Maye shouldn't fall past pick 3.
Yeah, sneakily a good coaching staff to help coach him up as well. They've already obviously worked with a very big-armed quarterback in Josh Allen with Brian Daboll there. Sneaky good offensive line talent. If Evan Neal can figure his shit out at right tackle, or maybe they move him inside to guard, you have a staple left tackle in Andrew Thomas. The rest of the line in decent shape. Like you said, the wide receiver core could be a little bit better, but in this instance, Troy Franklin goes in the 2nd round of the Giants. They have Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, 2nd year off the ACL. They could add some guys in free agency still at this point in time as well. the Giants would definitely need to add around Drake Maye, but I feel pretty decent about the coaching, about the protection that he'd be working with there. So 104 would come down to a couple different names. Obviously, as we talked about, Jayden Daniels did go 102 to the Washington Commanders. Have some good talent there to work with, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, those type of guys. J.J. McCarthy sneakily was the fourth quarterback off the board inside the top 5. So J.J. McCarthy, Minnesota Vikings come up all the way to get him at number 5 overall. He would actually probably start to come into consideration given that draft capital and landing spot. And then, of course, my actual 104, who I have ranked there right now, is Malik Nabers, who goes to the New England Patriots. In this instance, I don't believe we know who their quarterback is. They talked about it in the 3-round mock that they would sign a Jacoby Brissett, maybe give Mac Jones another year. They draft a guy in the 2nd round and Bo Nix.
Yep.
So it's probably like a Jacoby Brissett as the bridge guy, Bo Nix is the 2nd quarterback, and that's where Malik Nabers goes. I'm really caught here because I think it's a bad landing spot, generally speaking, for Nabers, but I also don't really love the landing spot of Jayden Daniels. If I was actually in a rookie draft right now, I would be looking to trade out of this pick, try and trade down to 105, 106, take whatever guy kind of falls. But for me, I think I'm going to stick to my board. I think Malik Nabers is a borderline, elite prospect at wide receiver. Definitely did actually grade as an elite prospect for me. Bo Nix is an accurate quarterback. The Patriots landing spot is one that's not great from a fantasy perspective in theory, but they don't have any real target competition there. So what's to stop Malik Nabers from going out there his rookie season, having 135, 150 potentially targets his rookie year, and Bo Nix maybe gets in there. Jacoby Brissett, if he's the bridge guy in this scenario, is the type of quarterback that can get his number 1 receiver the ball. We saw that with Amari Cooper 2 years ago. So I'll take Malik Nabers here, but like I said, I would probably be looking to move down a little bit, sell and dangle the key of, Jayden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy to a quarterback needy team behind me.
Yeah, no, I understand the pick. Malik Nabers, talent-wise, goes top 6. Gets, like you said, an accurate distributor there with Bo Nix in the 2nd round. I'm more than comfortable with the landing spot. Again, I believe in Bo Nix. I think he's as much as I love J.J. McCarthy, I do think that if J.J. McCarthy is a top 10 pick, Bo Nix should be in the top 20 overall. So New England getting him at 47 in this area, also getting Malik Nabers there, I think that would be an A+ draft for them. I'm on the clock here at the 105, and you mentioned the name Jayden Daniels. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy in some draft rooms will be considered up to this high. From a prospect to prospect standpoint, I understand it. I think J.J. McCarthy is closer to Jayden Daniels than Jayden Daniels is to Drake Maye from an NFL perspective. But we're still playing this game of fantasy football, and what Jayden Daniels is able to do with his legs, with the 2nd overall draft capital, landing there with Terry McLaurin, with Jahan Dotson, with a coaching staff that, well, it's going to get scrutinized there with Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury. I feel like based off what we've seen from Cliff Kingsbury, he's fine letting his playmaking quarterback make plays. We saw that in college with Caleb Williams. Jayden Daniels cut from that same type of cloth as a playmaking level quarterback. If you want to just sit him in the pocket and force him to be a Matt Ryan, that's one thing. But I do feel like they're going to afford him the opportunity to extend plays, make plays out of structure like we've seen from him in his time in LSU. And I do think 5th overall is probably the floor you would see him if he goes 2nd overall to the Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, the fit makes sense. I just personally would take Drake Maye if I was the Commanders, so I don't understand why they wouldn't just go in that direction. Especially, I mean, Cliff Kingsbury, do we really believe in his ability to call a great offense? He kind of held Caleb Williams back. What we saw, what his tenure looked like with Arizona towards the end. Not 100% sold on the fit of whoever goes to number 2 overall to the Commanders, unless they actually go ahead, and this has been rumored, and try and trade up for 1 to get Caleb Williams because he's DC born and all that kind of stuff. The Commanders quarterback situation makes me a little bit nervous, whoever ends up going there. So definitely makes some sense. I probably would have gone with the same guy there at 105. 2 guys stand out to me, or 3 guys even really too. Yeah. With Odunze going 7th overall to the Tennessee Titans. A lot of people, again, similar to Nabers going to the Patriots, I think people would consider this like maybe a worst case scenario for those receivers because the Patriots and Titans not thought of as elite landing spots. They're no Chargers, they're no Cardinals, they're no, whatever. But Will Levis is a gunslinger. Brian Callahan comes in. That Bengals offense towards the end, if they believe in their quarterback, which it looks like they do, they let Joe Burrow let it rip, right? They let him throw it all over the field, and they let him, push an up-tempo offense and that kind of thing. So I am going to go with a sneaky good landing spot in Odunze to the Tennessee Titans here. J.J. McCarthy, Brock Bowers, both would be in consideration for this pick. I'm sure you're going to go with one of them with your next one, but I actually really like Rome Odunze the Titan. He kind of looks like a Titan. I don't know about you, but like I could see him wearing a Tennessee Titans uniform. And I do think the whole Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell meme with the Bengals situation a couple of years ago does apply to the Titans this year. Do you go with Joe Alt? Do you go with Rome Odunze or nabers, whoever falls to you? I actually do think they're going to opt to go for the pass catcher because with Will Levis, I mean, the Titans offensive line is bad, but I think Brian Callahan and his father coming in, they can like coach the offensive line up. They still have free agency to be able to address. Maybe they're going hard after a guy like Tyron Smith potentially, or some of the other big offensive line free agents and Wenyu or some of the guards or whatever. So I actually really like the idea of adding a number one receiver to your team because you don't really have much to work with there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you want to support your young quarterback one way or another. It depends on your view of the prospect. If you view Odunze as a better prospect than Joe Alt, you take the wide receiver. If you view Joe Alt as the better prospect than Rome Odunze, you take the tackle. I really feel like it's a water spot for Tennessee. Depending on how they feel about these two prospects is going to be the direction they go. And you mentioned that Rome Odunze does feel like a Titan. The other spot that I can envision him as well, they end up trading up in this instance of this mock, but would be the New York Giants. So obviously with the New York Giants out of the way, going from 6 to 3 opens up the opportunity here for the Titans to take him at 7. So I think he's very worthy of that 106 pick. And maybe in some of your more, analytically inclined rooms, he may even fall further than this. So take the value on Rome Odunze. He is a stud player and he is well worthy of being the third receiver off the board. I'm picking here at the 107, and you kind of alluded to it would be between two guys. The two guys in question here, Brock Bowers falling to the 15th overall pick with the Indianapolis Colts. From a pure grade perspective, he would be my choice. However, because it's a 6-point passing touchdown and because I love the draft capital at 5th overall, I love the landing spot. If I were to navigate the perfect landing spots for these respective quarterbacks, the Minnesota Vikings would be the absolute nuts when it comes to J.J. McCarthy. Bring in maybe a guy like Jacoby Brissett, a veteran quarterback for the early portion of the season, having him working with those weapons, with Kevin O'Connell, young quarterback you're dealing with J.J. McCarthy, ton of tools at his disposal. I really think if J.J. McCarthy is going to work out in the NFL, this would be one of the landing spots he does. I love Minnesota as a fit. I really do feel like if you can get J.J. McCarthy at 7th overall in this instance, it would give you a lot of value on investment, return on investment.
Yeah, you bring in Jimmy Garoppolo or Ryan Tannehill to start a couple games at the beginning of the season, let J.J. McCarthy marinate a little bit. Makes some sense. And, you mentioned Brock Bowers to the Colts there at 15th overall at 108. I'm not going to do it yet. I'm just going to talk it through 1 second because my wide receiver 4 in this class went to his nuts landing spot, right? So Xavier Worthy runs a 4.21. I thought he was fast before. I'm not double counting his speed. I knew he was going to run in the 4.2s. Did I think he was going to break Ross's record? Not necessarily. I thought he ran 4.29 coming out of high school, and I've talked about that before. Xavier Worthy going to the Kansas City Chiefs is literally the nuts landing spot for him. You have Rashee Rice to work over the middle as like the, over the middle slot, slant type of receiver. Xavier Worthy can stretch the field. You can give him design touches. This would be the only instance in which I would put him over a guy like Brock Bowers. And the only reason I'm doing it is because think about the redraft projection for a guy like Brock Bowers. And also, too, sometimes I've noticed this in a lot of dynasty leagues. It's difficult to move tight ends in trades. I think Xavier Worthy would have more open market value because he's tethered to Patrick Mahomes. And because the tight end position has gotten a lot deeper in recent years. So with Brock Bowers going to a landing spot where he has, an inaccurate quarterback, a raw quarterback, it's probably going to be a run-heavy offense there in Indianapolis. Michael Pittman, I'm assuming, will be back on a long-term contract or a franchise tag. The deadline for that is actually today. And you also have Josh Downs to compete for targets with in the slot, especially for Brock Bowers. I like the landing spot in theory for Bowers, but I actually think from a fantasy perspective, it's not one of his best. I think he would be much better off in Los Angeles or, even the Jets too. Like, I think that would be a better spot for him as well. So I'm going to do the rare thing that I don't like doing, which is put the inferior prospect ahead of the better prospect because Worthy gets the best landing spot draft capital possible and Brock Bowers a little bit less so, more like a 20th, 30th percentile outcome for him.
I think you make a good point in terms of open market tradability. Like, you ask any tight end in Dynasty that isn't Brock Bowers, other than Sam Laporta and Trey McBride, what their exact trade value is. It's going to vary from league to league. And sometimes even navigating, like I've seen multiple instances in some of my leagues where somebody will have, like Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid or George Kittle and Dallas Goedert, or I have a couple leagues where it's like, Mark Andrews and Jake Ferguson. Like, a lot of these guys have double tight ends that they can't sell in the open market because a lot of people are content with their rooms of David Njoku or with their rooms of, like I mentioned the name Dallas Goedert, like Kittle. Even the lower tight end ones in Dynasty, I feel like people are hesitant to make an upgrade from.
Yeah, exactly. The tight end position is not nearly as shallow as it used to be. I think Bowers, if he was in last year's rookie class, would have had way more value than he has right
Yes.
now, even though last year's rookie class also had a lot of great tight ends. It's just, this time last year, we were talking about, hey, it's Kyle Pitts and then a bunch of competitive guys. Now we actually have a lot of young guys stepping up, like McBride, like Kincaid, like Sam Laporta, like all these dudes. And we still have all those veteran guys like Kittle, like Goddard, like David Njoku, like Kelsey, whatever you're talking about there. So I think Xavier Worthy, to me, would have a lot more open market value in this situation. You're on the board at 109. Are you going to go with Bowers? Are you going to? Yeah, I think you kind of have to at this point.
Yeah, tight end premium, the prospect grade that I have on him. I just mentioned that outside of Sam Laporta and Trey McBride, like I feel like as soon as Brock Bowers gets drafted, he's going to be considered amongst that top tier of dynasty tight ends. So I will select him here. Again, you mentioned the landing spot goes 15th overall to the Indianapolis Colts. You mentioned you didn't really like the landing spot. Again, maybe that's because of the nature of Anthony Richardson, but I kind of like having a guy that has that type of versatility at tight end. You have Michael Pittman, the big physical outside wide receiver. You have your slot receiver there, Josh Downs, your field stretcher there with Alec Pierce. Getting an offensive fulcrum tight end will really open up this offense as a whole. And your main goal as an Indianapolis Colts is to develop Anthony Richardson and make him your franchise quarterback. Doesn't hurt taking arguably the second best talent in this class. Not talking about positional value. I'm just saying straight up talent. You can make the argument that Marvin Harrison is one and Brock Bowers is the second best player in this class. So I will take him here.
Yeah, makes sense. And again, maybe people are going to be mad that I didn't take him at 107, 108 area because that's probably where he would go on a talent basis, factoring in even positional value. But, like we already talked about, I think it's possible that if this scenario played out, he would even go later than this. Like, I think it's possible that, with Brian Thomas going top 10, with A.D. Mitchell going to the Buffalo Bills, with, some of these other landing spots, with Jonathan Brooks being the only running back selected in the first 3 rounds of this mock draft, it's possible that Bowers would tumble down even further than this. So, yeah, I agree with Bowers. He definitely needed to come off the board. At this point in time, I mean, Michael Penix did get first-round draft capital. So that is something worth noting. If I was, picking a 110 in this situation and I wanted to dangle, hey, we got a first-round quarterback still on the board. If anybody needs a quarterback, I would probably go ahead and do that. I think there's a couple clear options here on the board between Brian Thomas Jr. going to the Falcons at number 10 overall. And in the mock draft, specifically Connor and Trevor mentioned that they would have Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta. So keep that in mind. It's not your same old Falcons. They have Zach Robinson coming in as the offensive coordinator, Drake London, Brian Thomas Jr., Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. This could be a really high-flying offense. So this is not your dad's Arthur Smith Falcons team. I think that Brian Thomas Jr. probably has to be the pick for me here because as a prospect, I have him a slight tier ahead of Adonai Mitchell, even though Adonai Mitchell, I would say, went to the better landing spot in Buffalo. I think I would have to go with Thomas here.
Yeah, I mean, I really like it. Obviously, I've been a Brian Thomas wide receiver in the class truther for the last couple of months. Very vindicated off of that combine performance. Obviously sees his draft capital. I mean, he was projected, top 20, top 25 pick for the long term. Now we're seeing him go 10th overall, and I really do think this could be the case in the NFL. And like you said, signing Kirk Cousins, really opening up this offense. I mean, if this happened, they added Brian Thomas on top of Drake London, on top of Kyle Pitts, on top of Bijan Robinson. I mean, get your tickets right now for Kirk Cousins leading the league in passing yards. So I really do think that would be not only within the range of outcomes, but he should be one of the favorites with that type of weapons group. So really big fan. Brian Thomas here, 110. It would have been between him and AD as well for me, and I will just take AD Mitchell with this next pick. You mentioned Lance in the nuts here with the Buffalo Bills. They need that big-time outside wide receiver that can affect the third level of the field. It doesn't get much better than taking the 6'2", 205-pound speedster who – nobody really expected him to run that fast. I thought he'd be, maybe a mid 4.4, late 4.4 type of guy, but him hitting 4.34, man, like he is nearly a first-round lock at this point. Lands at the nuts. Obviously, Josh Allen, big-time arm. If you bring in 4.34 speed at that size with Josh Allen, it's going to be a field day for opposing defenses.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mitchell, I talked about how hit or miss he is. He kind of would fill the Gabe Davis role, who's kind of hit or miss, but I mean, I think you're expecting at least wide receiver 3 production. Even with Mitchell's flashes, he could get there even as a rookie. And then obviously if he can develop, if Diggs is still there, he could teach him a couple things. The coaching staff there is pretty good. Of course, working with Josh Allen obviously helps your cases as well. So yeah, AD Mitchell, I think, he's going to be a staple in first round NFL mock drafts going forward in this back end of the first range because of how he tested, because of what he did at the NFL Combine. So we do still have 1 first rounder left. It's Michael Penix Jr. I am not going to select him here because there's 2 players that I believe belong to go ahead and still. It's going to be either Ladd McConkey, who goes in the 2nd round, 48th overall to the Jaguars. I will say, Troy Franklin going 39 to the Giants. He doesn't actually quite fit in yet, but he's also interesting. And because there was only 1 running back selected in the first 3 rounds of this mock, Jonathan Brooks going to the Green Bay Packers to replace eventually the guy that we comp him to, which is Aaron Jones. The first year, you probably assume Brooks is like getting back slowly. Aaron Jones is still the lead back there. But then coming 2025 and beyond, that's when Jonathan Brooks would take over this backfield. So that's kind of the projection you'd be looking at there. For me, I'm a huge Trevor Lawrence guy. I'm a huge believer in this Jacksonville offense, and they take like one of my dudes in this draft with Ladd McConkey. I actually really, really like this fit. And I know at face value, it would seem like, hey, why would they take Ladd McConkey? Christian Kirk would kind of occupy the same role. It seems a little bit redundant. But I think contrary to popular belief, everybody sees Lawrence's big arm and assumes he needs like a deep threat or whatever. He actually kind of already has that role in-house with Zay Jones. And Calvin Ridley was the type of guy that was also working downfield last year, and it didn't really work. Even though Calvin Ridley, like Harmon's reception perception came out, and it looks like he was separating at a decently high rate, I think that Trevor Lawrence actually works better when he's working a horizontal short passing game offense, and he can pick and take his shots when he needs to a guy like Zay Jones. Maybe they draft a guy later or sign another guy who's a deep threat in free agency. Evan Ingram, of course, at the tight end position can stretch the field, and we've even seen ETN work out down the field as a running back out of the backfield. So I actually really like, getting all these athletes, McConkey, Kirk, Travis Etienne, Evan Ingram, just getting them all in space, letting Trevor Lawrence use his progression ability, use his arm to be able to fit into tight windows. I really like the fit of this. So Ladd McConkey closes out the first round. Again, if you guys are thinking, this is not how actual rookie drafts are going to go, remember, we're doing this from the perspective that how these guys mock the NFL draft is going to happen. We do this to get a lot of practice with these mock drafts. We do this because we want to get it's a lot of fun for starters, but also it's good to work through all of these scenarios to know how the rankings would change post NFL draft based on what happens here. Because, when you practice this a million times, no running backs being selected in the first 3 rounds, a lot of running backs being selected in the first 3 rounds, this guy going to his nuts landing spot, that guy going to his nuts landing spot. Yes. You get a feel for how the draft should go when the actual NFL draft takes place.
Yeah, 100%. The worst thing you could be in your rookie draft is reactionary, just absorbing new information right after the NFL draft happens. By mapping out these type of scenarios where this happens or that happens or that happens, kind of having a blueprint for how we would value these certain players will transfer into the NFL draft. When we see exactly what happens, we can make that adaptation on the spot. Being able to prepare right now, ultimately for your rookie drafts in the future, is the key. Understanding, what if this player gets the nuts landing spot like Corey said, or what if this player ends up falling in the draft and gets a bad landing spot? Being prepared for all these scenarios is how you get ahead of your league. So we're trying to get you guys ahead of your league. That's why we're putting out the content. You took Ladd McConkey at the 112. Again, a guy I would be considering at that spot as well. The 2-1, though, you did mention Michael Penix Jr. goes 12th overall to the Denver Broncos. In this spot, I would try to be trading out of the pick. Like you said, I'm not the biggest Michael Penix fan myself, but I got to respect the first round draft capital goes in the top 15, lands with Sean Payton. And I understand there's a lot of controversy whether he can create out of structure, including myself. I don't think Michael Penix is the type of creator that the other 4 quarterbacks selected in this class are. But in the 6-point passing touchdown league, working with a coach that values the smart, cerebral quarterback, like I think Michael Penix could be at the next level, would be key for him. Again, I'm not necessarily understanding what their weapons core would look like going forward. Do they sign Cortland Sutton? Do they bring back Jerry Jeudy? A lot of uncertainty there, but I'm respecting the draft capital, and top 15 gets you at the 2-1, in my opinion.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't be able to pull the trigger yet. I think there's 2 more players, like I talked about, that I would take over Penix, but I understand where you're at with the top 12 draft capital. I already kind of made the case for Jonathan Brooks. He's going to be my pick here. Like I said, Aaron Jones is in-house there. Coming off of a torn ACL, we don't expect a whole lot out of Jonathan Brooks early on in the season. Maybe they're really patient with him because they have Jones. Jones, as a veteran who's dealt with injuries in the past, maybe he's the type of guy that kind of tapers off as the season goes along, and Jonathan Brooks finishes strong in that situation. I think this would be a really good pairing. You got 2 guys with a similar skill set. When they're on the field, you don't know which one the defense is doing. The problem with having Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, is it telegraphs exactly what you're doing to a defense. With both of these guys, they're both great receiving backs. They're both good in between the tackles. They're both good on the goal line. It makes a whole lot of sense to me, and it affords you the ability to let Jonathan Brooks get ready at his own pace because you already have a veteran in place. If Brooks goes to the Texans or Brooks goes to the Cowboys or something like that, he's going to have to start and be ready for week 1 right away, which I don't think is the best thing for him because he might not look completely like himself. As he gets adapted to the NFL, he's also thinking, oh my God, hopefully my knee holds up. Like, you need him to get ready and accustomed to the NFL at his own pace, get a couple touches here and there for the first 6 weeks, and then off to the races.
Yeah, I like that rationale too. Jonathan Brooks, I considered him at the Penix spot, but I kind of broke it down like, ooh, top 15 quarterback versus second round running back. I kind of leaned the way of the quarterback, but like I said, I mean, Jonathan Brooks, talent wise, only running back in this mock wise, he is well deserving of being the 2-2 in this scenario. So I'm back on the clock here, and I haven't taken a Dallas Cowboy yet. I'm going to do it now. Keon Coleman goes 56th overall to my beloved Dallas Cowboys. I mean, if we got this on draft day, I believe in this mock draft scenario, they got J.C. Latham at 24 and still were able to get Keon Coleman in the second round. I mean, as a Cowboys fan, I'd be all for it. Keon Coleman brings an element of size in this wide receiver core that we don't quite have. Michael Gallup, a big shell of himself. Brandon Cooks being more of your speed threat. And obviously, CeeDee Lamb's your one. But getting a player like Keon Coleman that gives you that contested catch ability, that gives you that size at the X wide receiver position to be able to be afforded to move on from Michael Gallup, because Michael Gallup has an out in his deal after 2024. I feel like in this scenario, you grab Keon Coleman, maybe in year one, he learns behind Michael Gallup, he learns behind CeeDee Lamb, develops his route tree as a whole. And then by year two, once you cut Michael Gallup, Keon Coleman can be a legit number 2 on a top 5 overall offense in the league. So getting him at the 2-3 here, I would be a big fan, because I feel like he could be the T. Higgins of this offense, big physical outside wide receiver that we need.
Yeah, I think putting Coleman, if you're doing mock drafts yourself or wherever he goes in the NFL draft, with an established target hog makes a lot of sense, because Keon Coleman is not really a target hog. Like, I don't think he ever will be. I think he's going to max out 21, 23% target share in his best seasons. So you kind of have like your Mike Williams to Keenan Allen here, where Keon Coleman can be the Mike Williams red zone threat, maybe score 10 touchdowns on any given season, because CeeDee Lamb's going to demand a lot of attention in the red zone. Of course, Dak can run the ball. Maybe they add a running back or something like that. So I actually really like the fit there. I think Keon Coleman's a great fit for what the Cowboys want to do. I'm going to go with Troy Franklin at the 2-4, because he goes to a situation completely devoid of any real target earning ability. And Troy Franklin, every season of his Oregon career, got better and better at earning targets. And I know he had, let's say, a subpar combine performance, even though he ran 4.41 and he tested pretty well on par. I think a lot of people were expecting more out of him. And especially considering what Mitchell and Thomas and Worthy did, it seems a lot less, appealing to go after Troy Franklin. But the film is still pretty good. He still has the ability to develop a full route tree, develop the ability to be a number 1 receiver. It's just going to take him a little bit of time. And at least with the Giants, you have a guy who's going to be a big armed quarterback coming in there with Drake Maye. Troy Franklin can get it downfield to him. He can also get it into him in intermediate areas. And when I watched Troy Franklin's film, I expected to see Jalen Hyatt, which is ironically would be his teammate in this area. I expected to see the type of receiver that's just going to catch deep balls, going to catch screen passes and take him to the house. And I saw a lot more route running ability than I was expecting, to be honest. So Troy Franklin going to the Giants, they desperately need a guy to establish himself as their number 1 receiver. The body type and the frame and the skill set says he probably is not likely to do it. But when you look at his analytics profile, what he does on film, and how he progressed throughout his collegiate career, I feel a little bit more confident that he's not Jameson Williams 2.0, even though that's kind of what he looks like physically. Jameson Williams also, for what it's worth, did tear his ACL his final year at college. It stunted his development. Troy Franklin doesn't have that obstacle to overcome.
Yeah, and I mean, although we haven't seen the volume in the NFL yet from a guy like Jameson Williams, we have seen it on a per-touch basis. He's been a really explosive figure to that Lions offense. So like you said, maybe the ACL stunted his development a little bit, had the injuries this last offseason heading into the year. With Troy Franklin, I think this would be a big fit for Drake Maye. You pair him with that big armed quarterback, you give him another weapon in this offense, and this would make me a lot more confident with taking Drake Maye at 103, knowing that they had Troy Franklin, hence why I mentioned it when I made the pick at 103. But you took Troy Franklin. He was also in consideration for me if he had fallen back. Now I'm at a little bit of a dilemma, because you could go, if you're a big Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson fan, somebody like that at this spot, going in the top 40 to the Chargers and the Panthers respectively. You could also go with a guy like Bo Nix, pairs with Malik Nabers in this instance, falls to the second round to the New England Patriots. And although the assurance of a second round quarterback isn't there compared to a first round quarterback, I trust in the player that Bo Nix represents. I trust that as soon as he lands with Gerard Mayo, with that New England front offense, he will acclimate himself well. And maybe he doesn't start right away. Maybe this is a Jordan Love situation where he sits behind a vet like Jacoby Brissett or another vet. Maybe they bring in, 1-year deal for an older player. Then you have Bo Nix potentially throwing to Malik Nabers and co for the foreseeable future. So 2-5, I'm willing to take the risk on Bo Nix. Obviously, the risk here is that second-round quarterback, maybe he never gets playing time, but I really do think that Bo Nix is a good enough quarterback to be a sustained starter long-term, so I will take him.
Yeah, I think of these quarterbacks, Nick's actually might be one of the most pro-ready ones. So I think knowing that the Patriots like have no options in house right now, like maybe they bring in, like you said, a Russell Wilson on like a 1-year deal or something. Yeah. I think Bo Nix actually, if you go into the draft with like really no plan at quarterback, you might go with one at 3 if the right one falls to you. You might trade down and take one. You might take one in the second round, like what kind of transpired in this situation. Yep. Bo Nix makes a lot of sense for the Patriots, man. I think he can come in and operate the type of offense that they want to operate, which is horizontal field reads, get the ball out accurately. That's exactly what Bo Nix did at Oregon. It's exactly what he can do well in the NFL. So it actually does make a lot of sense to me. This would be the area of the draft that, if Trey Benson or whatever had good draft capital, 3rd round, 2nd round draft capital, he would be flying off the board here. Same goes for Jalen Wright and Audric Estime and, whatever running back you actually like here. Okay, again, we're only doing this based on the prospects that were drafted in this 3-round mock draft. So we're not going to take any more running backs for the rest of the draft. For me, this would come down to Roman Wilson. He goes to 37th overall to the Chargers. It would come down to Ricky Pearsall, went 33rd overall to the Panthers. Very, very high draft capital for him. I mean, you could factor in a guy like Jatavian Sanders, goes 49th overall to the Bengals. Xavier Legette goes 72nd overall to the Jets. They need some pass catching help. I consider myself an Xavier Legette truther at this point in time. Even Jalen Polk, too, 62nd to the Ravens would factor in. I'm going to go with Xavier Legette. I know it's kind of a no-no taking a guy 72nd overall draft capital versus 33rd and 37th overall draft capital. I would maybe trade down in this scenario if I was actually on the clock. But for me, Xavier Legette is a much more superior prospect to Ricky Pearsall, much more superior prospect to Roman Wilson. And I think the idea behind signing Alan Lazard last year was get a big body downfield playmaker. The idea behind signing Mecole Hardman was getting a guy that can stretch the field. And you can have that alongside Garrett Wilson. And if that had worked, it would have made a lot of sense, but it didn't work. So you have Garrett Wilson as your primary number 1, and you have Xavier Legette now to stretch the field and also be a big body playmaker in the red zone. I liked Xavier Legette's film. I know his prospect profile is terrible. That factored into my grade. But what I saw on film is him beating the shit out of Kamari Lassiter for 4 straight quarters against the University of Georgia. I saw him baby boying the Florida Gators defense and Alabama's defense and like Mississippi State's defense. Like he was dominating in the SEC. Yes, it was at an older age. Yes, he didn't produce for four years prior to that. But whatever turned on for him in the 2023 season, I believe it's real. I don't believe it's a factor of he's bigger, faster, stronger than everyone else, which is true. But he's probably also going to be bigger, faster, stronger than everybody else in the NFL as well.
Yeah, you mentioned in normal draft rooms you trade down. For the purpose of this one, that was a big snipe of mine as well. We are the Xavier Legette truthers. I mean, if you're watching this video, comment down below that FSC loves Xavier Legette, because you won't hear other podcasts talk about Xavier Legette as rosy as we do. And we understand why. Again, like you mentioned, terrible prospect profile. Didn't do anything for the first 4 years of his college. Everything clicked in this past year. I've mentioned the context before. Obviously, Juice Wells ends up missing the bowl game last year. I believe Jalen Brooks, ends up declaring for the draft, gets signed with the Cowboys this last offseason. Going to that bowl game against Notre Dame last year, he really started developing that rapport with Spencer Rattler, has that big game, has the full offseason to really fine-tune his ability, knowing that, hey, I can be a 7-catch, 78-yard, 3-touchdown player against Notre Dame. Why can't I take that momentum into my final year? And he did that. He took that momentum and he ran with it. And if he was to fall to 72nd overall, if you're a New York Jets fan, you got to be pumping your fist, because this is the tailor-made wide receiver 2 for Aaron Rodgers. You have your nuanced route runner with Garrett Wilson. Get your big physical freak of nature with a guy like Xavier Legette. Comps to a guy like DK Metcalf. Comps to a guy like A.J. Brown. Just a big physical athlete in the open field. Is he going to struggle to get acclimated from a nuanced standpoint? A lot of people will point to that. But to be honest, man, I thought he was a lot more nuanced than people seem to talk about when it comes to Xavier Legette.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of receivers in this class that run vertical route trees. Franklin, Thomas, all these dudes, Adonai Mitchell. But I actually think Legette showed more maturity, and it makes sense. He's the oldest of them than those guys did. And I think he can be coached up in other areas. So, yeah, definitely like the fit there of Xavier Legette. Where are you going here with the 2-7?
Yeah, so there are a couple names that you mentioned earlier that would be in consideration. You could respect the draft capital of guys like Ricky Pearsall and Roman Wilson. There's still a player that I graded higher than them that still got second-round capital here, lands with the Baltimore Ravens. They just need professional pass catchers, which I think Jalen Polk represents at the next level. Does he have the highest ceiling as a player? Not necessarily, but you had him comp to a guy like Rashee Rice. I had him comp to a guy like Tyler Boyd. And people might be thinking, why are you comping this big, downfield threat in college to more of these intermediate targets in the NFL? I honestly think that's going to be the progression of his game going to the NFL. The NFL may see he's not the best athlete. We want to get him these intermediate targets. His hands are his best asset, and having that as a consistent chain mover in Lamar Jackson's offense, when you have Mark Andrews, when you have Zay Flowers, when you have a guy like Rashad Bateman on the outside, plugging in a consistent chain moving threat like Jalen Polk, I think he could be at the next level, would be a great fit. So getting him at 2.7, I'd be extremely happy.
Yeah, we haven't seen like the contested catch receiver work for Lamar Jackson yet, but like the shots that they've taken are like Sammy Watkins and Miles Boykin. Like you got a much better bet here with Jalen Polk. So I really like that pick. Again, I'm stuck here. Like I don't know if I want to go with respecting the draft capital picks with Pearsall, with Roman Wilson, or if I want to go with the guy that I graded higher. And you know what? I'm going to go with the guy that I graded higher. And Jalen McMillan, 85th overall, he goes to the Houston Texans. The type of role that he's going to play kind of conflicts a little bit with what Tank Dell does well. Nico Collins, of course, is going to be the outside downfield threat. Tank Dell, kind of a vertical slot Z receiver or whatever. But I think Jalen McMillan could be a consistent chain mover for this offense. I want pieces of CJ Stroud's life, man. Like he's a stud. He's an awesome prospect. Maybe this pick precludes the Texans from re-signing Nico Collins when he's up for his next contract, because if they hit on this pick, they're going to have 3 great young wide receivers. It's okay if they want to let Collins go, or, maybe tag him and trade him away or something like that. I'm not exactly sure how this would all logistically shake out, but what I do know is I really like Jalen McMillan's film. He comps very favorably to a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba, a guy who can get open over the middle of the field, who has pretty decent athleticism, pretty good juice to be able to do things after the catch as well, and good physicality, good toughness. He's just a smart player. And I think smart player, put him in an offense that, this Texans scheme is very, very friendly to wide receivers in general, and a quarterback who's going to get him very, very accurate targets, especially where he's going to work over the middle of the field. That's one of CJ Stroud's biggest strengths. So I think Jalen McMillan to the Texans, I just want pieces of that offense. I want to attach myself to Stroud. Yeah,
trusting a really good player. Funny enough, by the way, your comp for him, my comp for him, played with CJ Stroud in college, and that worked out pretty damn well. So Jalen McMillan, like the 3rd round draft capital isn't ideal, but I do agree. I had him graded over the Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall range. That goes, much higher in this scenario. But I mean, it's trusting the player. I think Jalen McMillan is going to be a very good NFL player. So despite him going in the 3rd round here, I understand the rationale for taking him over the draft capital. Now, speaking of the draft capital, I think Roman Wilson, like you mentioned, the vertical slot archetype has kind of been hit or miss in recent years, but when it does hit, it's going to hit with a guy like Justin Herbert, man. Going top 40 overall, obviously landing with his former head coach at Michigan with Jim Harbaugh there. And I mean, it's just trusting the youth movement with the receiver core for the Los Angeles Chargers, respecting the fact that Keenan Allen's getting older, Mike Williams coming off the ACL, not really much else in that receiver room unless you're a big Quentin Johnson fan. He was one of the worst graded wide receivers in the NFL as a rookie. You plug in Roman Wilson, you need to surround Justin Herbert with more weapons. I really do think Roman Wilson occupying that vertical slot role will have more value with a quarterback like Herbert than he would with maybe, a Russell Wilson last year, who, let's just say, was fighting his last legs in Denver.
Yeah, makes total sense there. I mean, Harbaugh, obvious connection. I'm assuming that's what the rationale was of putting Roman Wilson to the Chargers, is that Harbaugh's familiar with him. He's probably going to want to bring his guy in. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the fit here. I think that Roman Wilson would have to try and learn how to play vertical slot, or like maybe play Z receiver on the outside. I'm just not a huge fan of putting Roman Wilson this high in mock drafts, but I actually do think it's possible he goes this high. Like, I think the NFL is quite high on him. I'm just personally more viewing him as like a late day 2 type of guy. I think he should be going in the 3rd round, not in the 2nd round, especially not the top 40 where he goes here. Speaking of a guy that I don't think should be going in the top 40, I'm going to bite the bullet on Ricky Pearsall. He goes 33rd overall to the Carolina Panthers. What is Carolina doing in this scenario? Like, you passed on Ladd McConkey and Troy Franklin for Ricky Pearsall. Like, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. If you were going to take a guy who's smooth and can get open and separate and has good speed, why did you not take Ladd McConkey or Troy Franklin? That would have made way, way more sense in my opinion. But regardless, if this is why we do these mock drafts. If I'm wrong about Ricky Pearsall's talent, I think he's okay. I think he can do things well. I think he can separate well. He's got good hands. He's just not the strongest guy in the world. I think functional strength is a problem for him. And also, too, his analytics profile is awful. He pretty much didn't produce until this season. He's like 23 years old already. If I'm wrong about Ricky Pearsall, this would work out quite well, though, right? Like, when you think about it, there's not a lot of targets available, taken up by established pass catchers in Carolina. So if Ricky Pearsall does become, let's say, what we wanted Ladd McConkey to become, which is this like target hog alpha, Z slot wide receiver who can get 130, 140 targets a year, kind of like mini Amon-Ra St. Brown, Christian Kirk Mock-esque type of production, then Ricky Pearsall would actually be a really good fit. I just think he's overvalued at this current point in time, and he should be more of a third round, maybe early day 3 type of wide receiver.
Yeah, no, I agree with that assessment. Again, he graded well below some of the guys that went after him in this draft. But I mean, with Ricky Pearsall, I can see him going this high simply because he tested as a much better athlete than I even saw on film. I mean, him going out there, posting the RAS that he had, running 4.41, like he made himself a lot of money at the combine because I went into the assumption that he was an average athlete. He's probably going to be a slot-only player. So showing that he has more juice than I anticipated definitely helps his stock. And like you said, I mean, he's got a high floor, in my opinion. Like, I feel like he can be a wide receiver 4 right off the bat, probably a wide receiver 3 throughout his NFL tenure. But in the second round of my rookie drafts, I'm kind of reaching for the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 upside. But at the 2-10 spot, getting a guy that I feel comfortable if he hits his apex can be a top 36 wide receiver, especially in this Carolina spot. I'm cool with biting the bullet there with 210, which you end up doing at this spot. So I'm back on the clock here, 211, and I'm caught between a few names. It is a 0.5 tight end premium. He does land with the Cincinnati Bengals in the second round. And judging from the fact that the next tight end is not selected until the 101st overall pick with Cade Stover going to the Washington Commanders, I will bite the bullet on your hook'em boy himself, Ja'Tavion Sanders. So let me just knock it in, and then I will give you the rationale. You watch this guy one play and think, oh my God, this is the next David Njoku. And then you'll watch him the next play and he'll miss a block on a reverse and have Xavier Worthy tackled in the backfield. Like, that's really the experience when watching Ja'Tavion Sanders. But landing here with Cincinnati, with the quarterback situation, with the offensive situation for Ja'Tavion Sanders, who, by the way, yes, he wasn't the type of athlete we expected coming into the combine, but you watch the film on him, he's a much better athlete than his testing numbers would suggest. So getting him here at the end of the second round, I'm really cool with.
Yeah, I think he'll end up running again at the Texas Pro Day. I think he also could do the vertical because he didn't do the vertical or the broad at the combine. I actually think that's probably his best athletic test of all the ones that they do at the combine. So his RAS score should be on the rise once he actually gets those numbers in. But yeah, like you said, frustrating player to watch. Definitely has a lot of highs, very athletic, excellent hands, even better than Brock Bowers. It's just, you know, we got to hone those highs and make them more consistent and limit some of the lows that you see from him on film. So final pick of the mock draft. I'm here at the 212. It would be between a couple players here. We have Devontae Walker as the final player, I believe, selected in the second round. He was going 55th overall to the Cleveland Browns. Very Donovan Peoples-Jones-esque from a skill set standpoint. I guess he'd be kind of replacing Donovan Peoples-Jones here. You also have Brandon Rice, who joins Caleb Williams there in Chicago at 75th overall. I think he's a well-rounded number 2, number 3 type of projection of wide receiver if he hits his ceiling. So I do actually really like that landing spot. And then you also have Malachi Corley essentially going to replace Deebo Samuel. That's the way that I'm looking at this pick. Deebo Samuel, you know, he's making a lot of money. Maybe the 49ers are thinking, hey, we got a younger version, a cheaper version of Deebo Samuel here. We're going to take Malachi Corley at 94th overall, and then this will be Deebo's last season, and we'll put Malachi Corley in the Deebo role. To me, that feels like forcing it. I don't think the 49ers would do that, and I don't think Corley is Deebo Samuel. So what I'm going to do is bite the bullet on Tez Walker. I'm going to take him here going to the Cleveland Browns. If Deshaun Watson can figure his shit out, I mean, Tez Walker would be in a pretty good spot. If we got Houston Texans Deshaun Watson at any point, even 85, 90% of Houston Texans Deshaun Watson, then Tez Walker as the downfield threat for a guy that can create out a structure makes a lot of sense. You have Amari Cooper as your number 1. Elijah Moore, I think, is going to be their day 1, you know, regular vertical slot or whatever, and Tez Walker can stretch the field. Is it a great fantasy option? Not necessarily, but we're running a little bit low. And again, if we had a lot of running backs, I would be taking a running back probably at this point in time.
Yeah, no, I agree with the rationale. I think this is the spot where you have to bite the bullet on Tez Walker. Again, we wouldn't know the scenario of how the 4th round shaped out. Maybe 4 running backs went into nice spots and they would be able to go ahead of him. But at this point, like you said, trust in the draft capital. Yes, is he going to have a big target commanding role in Cleveland? Not necessarily, but the valuable targets he should get should make him at least worthy for the 212 spot. Yeah, there's not really much else I have to add on that.
Yeah, for sure. So that is the end of the 2 rounds that we're doing here. Superflex Dynasty Rookie Mock Draft with landing spots. Shout out to Trevor and Connor over at the NFL Stock Exchange. We'll link the mock draft down below in the description if you guys want to go through. It's like a 2-hour video. So they went really, really in depth on what they think is going to happen in free agency, what they wanted to do with a lot of these picks. Again, don't shoot the messenger. We didn't actually do this mock draft. We're just going off of what they they went with. So again, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Of course, we'll have tons more of these as the NFL draft gets closer and closer, and we will have other NFL draft and fantasy football content coming at you. So leave that down below in the comment section. What did you think? Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you want our full-on in-depth opinions on these rookie prospects, our Dynasty Wall Street Journal, the top 30 prospects we've done write-ups for, player cards, player comparisons, grading, all that stuff. The write-ups are on the Dynasty Wall Street Journal on flockfantasy.com right now. And our second edition will be coming out about a week from today, a week and a half from today on March 15th. We're going to have combine updates. We're going to have 20 more prospects for a total of 50 that you guys can learn about to get ahead of your league mates for your Dynasty rookie drafts. And of course, we'll have updates pre-NFL draft with pro day numbers and post-NFL draft with, landing spot analysis and sleepers and all that kind of stuff. So you're definitely going to want to keep it tapped in over on flockfantasy.com if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And again, use promo code FSE when you sign up. You'll get a 7-day free trial, 30% off any of the packages, 6 months for free when you sign up annually, and a free Zoom consultation with one of us when you sign up annually. Again, that's promo code FSE on flockfantasy.com. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.